Get Pucked.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Greg, Vito, and Matt here today. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Great as well.
Great. Greg, long time no see. Happy to have you back. Slotting in for Dave, who couldn't make it today. Good boys, I want to ask a very simple question straight out the gate. I want to get right into the hockey talk here. I want to maximize our time. My question is, I think, fairly straightforward and fairly simple. And I also think it's something that many people have been wondering for quite some time now. Why is Lane Hutson not on the first power play unit?
I don't know. I've been asking myself that question for a little bit now.
I don't want to hear I don't know. I want answers.
The only thing I could think of is that Marty St. Louis is going with the vet, in which it's Matheson, and he's just, he's a more proven thing, and maybe doesn't want to expose Lane Hutson to, the pressures of being the go-to guy and the go-to quarterback guy on the power play. Even though the few flashes and the few moments that he's had there, he's looked like he could handle it. It seems like they still want to gradually put him into those roles before they just say, here, it's all yours. At the end of the day, the kid is still very young. But yeah, at this point, I would say it's time. Give him some power play one duties. It doesn't have to be every single power play, but he should get a few looks per game at this stage. He handles himself well. He's able to handle the minutes. His body and his frame and the way he plays is something dynamic and different that a lot of players from the opposing teams are still struggling to figure out. The few times that he's been on the first power play, he's generated offense. He's gotten some production there and points. So the only thing I could think of is that they just don't want to throw him in the Lions den just yet.
So, devil's advocate here, and I'm going to pass it to Greg to kind of answer these kind of questions that I have based on your answer, which I understand. I'm putting you on the spot. This might not be necessarily how you feel, but this is how you're looking at a reason, trying to make sense out of this. Pressure being one of the reasons to not put a guy who you have no problems playing 30 minutes a game, but put him on the first line in power play. That could be an option. The fact that Matheson, for what he did last year, is kind of, earned that spot for now, and he's still a relatively young.
I think they see that they're already giving Lane Hutson more responsibilities than they probably even expected to give him from the start of the season. It's probably just like, you're already eating up 25, 30 minutes a game. We're putting you in all these situations and you're handling it very well. Power play duties, as we've come to see, that the power play has been abysmal in years past. And if it continued to be bad, do they really want to have that pressure on Lane Hutson saying, okay, he's obviously not a solution already, and already, labeling him in that category when, I think they're just taking a bit more of a cautious approach with him. Do I agree with it? No. It's a young man's game. It's a young man's sport nowadays. Put him in there until he's proving that he can't do it, or until, it becomes too, he needs that break from it. But the positive side is the fact that he is on the power play. It's just he's not on power play one all the time.
I imagine he wasn't on other power plays. Okay, well that'd be a whole other thing to talk about. At least he's on the second one. Fair enough. Greg, tell me why. Why is he not playing power play one?
Well, I think it's not scientific. It's like Vito said. It's about keeping Matheson on because he's proven that he can do it in the past, and he's a big. He collects points, and I think just yesterday when he got his goal on the power play, that set us back for like 20 games again when he's just not going to be movable from the first unit. The option I see though is maybe Kirby Dach is not necessarily the veteran and hasn't proven as much as Matheson has, and he's not maybe as comfortable as he has been in the past. I don't think it would hurt that bad to maybe, if there was an option that we could flip him for Hutson on the first unit, I think it's maybe more realistic than having Matheson on the second one from what I've seen. And I think, Hutson could generate from the half wall or wherever you put him, really. I think he could generate. So I think maybe it'd be an option to maybe get some offense, some more offense. And for Duck, I don't think it's too much of demotion because I think he hasn't looked bad on the power play, but I think giving him some minutes against worse PKs like second unit, third unit PKs could also make it make the second power play look good too. And especially when Laine is back, I think that's going to open up a lot more of options. So it's going to be interesting to see like over the next month or 2 months, because Laine is not going to want to play 20 seconds on the second unit.
Well, he'll probably have to work his way up to it, but yeah, I suspect he'll be on power play 1. Yeah, I agree with you.
But just on preseason, whatever, he was on the second unit, and he's not going to want to play 20 seconds on the second unit. Yesterday, Hutson one time played like 3 seconds out of the whole power play. So I think it's going to be a lot more like they're going to share the time a lot better once Laine comes back, because they're going to have no option but to do it. And so I think maybe at that point they're going to try and not stack up the first unit as much, and maybe have more options on both power plays.
I think you're nailing it. I mean, I'm trying to make heads and tails of it too. To me, in a perfect world, and I think how most teams structure their power play units 1 and 2, they really load up the first power play unit, and then they put what they got left to try to make something happen. You don't try to necessarily look for a perfect balance between the 2 units, because you could have in certain but more often than not case, your first power play unit is out there for the majority of that 2 minutes. So when I see Lane Hutson and you see what he can do and you see the game that he drives, to me, that screams somebody who should be on that first line. I mean, I understand what Matheson did, and I understand the points that he put up last year. I find it fascinating that you're suggesting that perhaps having 2 defensemen on it. I don't think a lot of teams do that, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, but not a lot of teams have offensive defensemen or mobile ones, the ones
correct.
that like Montreal has, where and that's why I like what Greg mentioned.
Yeah.
It wouldn't hurt Montreal, even though their power play is better this year than it was last year. It wouldn't hurt for them to have somebody like Lane Hutson and Matheson, who, when you look at their mobility, is basically like having a forwards back there. Right now, you look at Lane Hutson, what he's able to do with his edge work and threading the blue line and all that stuff is just on a different playing field. But I don't hate the idea of putting Kirby Dach on the second power play, even if he gets 30 seconds or whatever. It's not only just about putting him against inferior opposing lines and whatnot, but it's also like, here, go be the guy and own that power play line and take it to a level. Bring up that secondary scoring. Even if you do get 30 or only 40 seconds in on the power play, doesn't mean that on the next power play we won't start you first and then give 30 to 40 seconds to Nick Suzuki. You just rotate it, becomes a coaching thing, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't hurt right now. The way we're seeing it is Lane Hutson should be on the power play 1. However way you cut it, he should be there.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Even on 5-on-5, like Hudson's behind the net, he's not like the prototype defenseman, and so that's why I think he would fit. You could put him pretty much anywhere on the power play, and I think he'd generate more than anyone right now on the first power play. You put him behind the net, you put him in Slav's spot, bumper. I think he's too smart to not generate offense.
To me, it's the mobility. Chances. I like the mobility of it. I watch our power play, and I've been saying this for a while. The power play is one of the most predictable power plays I think I've seen against the teams that they played against, and looking around at highlights. The fact that their lack of movement is really what I take like a little bit of a problem sort of with, because when you move around quite a bit, that's where you make opportunities happen. And it seems like they try to do a lot of back and forth right near the blue line before, more often than not, ripping that shot from the blue line, instead of trying to make the players kind of chase after them and make angles open up where you can get a Nick Suzuki shot from right inside tight or Caufield, for example. I think Lane Hutson is the perfect complement for that. So it is a little bit, I don't say baffling, but it is confusing to me that he's not currently there. And the only thing that I can think of is that they were having Matheson with a lot of success last year, and they're comfortable having him still represent that spot on the first. And Hutson just makes that second unit that much more dangerous.
Well, that's it. I was going to add to that. It's right now they just need an additional threat.
That's what I think. Yeah. I don't agree with it necessarily, because I like to stack my first line personally. But if you're going to try to make an argument out of it, that clearly to me has to be the one that they're going with. They're trying to make the second one more dangerous. They're trying to add a spark plug there to really get into the zone. Maybe they notice that they're having a harder time, the second unit, to really get positioned in the offensive zone and set up. Lane Hutson skates from one end to the other like it's no one's business. So maybe that's why.
I think it's also because when you think about it, if you take Lane Hutson off that second power play, who's really going to be the mobile defenseman or somebody that could,
Well, they didn't have one.
Yeah. It'd be what you're going to put Caden Gooley, then the guy's really playing power play PK.
Well, that's it, right? They didn't have one, so this is how they're utilizing their assets. And again, it's you can make an argument for it. I just simply prefer to have the best of the best on one and make the best of the rest on the second. And Lane Hutson to me is the best of the best, so he should be on that first one. And I think you're going to connect more with him there. But I digress. It's not happening. It is puzzling. We're kind of making sense of it. A lot of people talking about it, and not just Habs fans. These are legitimate guys in the business that are tweeting out or that they're commenting on Hockey Night in Canada or whatever. Everybody's kind of being like, why isn't this kid up there yet? I mean, he really should be there. And so that's where I wanted to start the podcast today about, because this is something that's been going on now for pretty much after game 3. People were asking for this, and it hasn't happened yet. So hopefully that will change in the next little while. And I think, to Greg's point, the advent of Patrick Laney coming back is going to really change the dynamic of the power play drastically. He's got that killer elite shot. So where they slot him in, where they're going to put him, is he still going to be on that second unit? To be determined. We'll see. What I wanted to also talk about, because we mentioned last time, the bright shining stars on the team so far for this season, and obviously, yeah, they put together some wins in the last couple of games that they had, but I think it's fair to say that overall they're still at the bottom of the standings. I think last I checked, they were either last or second to last, so it's not good. But we identified Gallagher playing tremendously well. We identified Lane Hutson playing tremendously well, and we also identified Jake Evans, and we said Evans is really, really, really having a great season so far. He's a standout almost every game. He's always given his best. He's always out there doing whatever you ask of him. They've thrown him up on 2C, which obviously is a miscast, but he's doing the best he can where he can. And I think most people will agree that Jake Evans is having a pretty good season, and it's a contract year. And that leads me to my question for you two gentlemen. What do you offer for Jake Evans as a contract if you wanted to re-sign him, which I suspect the Habs are going to look to re-sign him? Start with you, Greg, this time.
I think in the pretty much 2.5-3 millions average for 3 years, I'd say. I think his last deal was 1.7 for 3 years. I think he's kind of proven that he's an NHLer for sure now. Maybe even a third line center. Now he's a second line center, but I think that's not the last.
No, I hope not.
Hopefully, so. But to his credit, I think he's doing very well, and I think he's proven that he can be a forward and maybe even a 3C if things go a little worse than expected. But I think he deserves definitely a little bit of an upgrade, and that's pretty much what I do. And if we can, there's definitely gonna be some interest from other teams, especially on an expiring deal. Playoff teams are gonna want to add a solid 4C. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of interest he can garner from other teams too.
Ooh, I'll follow up with you in a second on that one, because that does entertain a second question, I think. But for the time being, Vito, what would you offer for Jake Evans?
The max I would offer is the same contract Armia is coming off of. That's the max. So that's 3.4 million.
Yeah,
and it was a 4-year deal. That's the max that I would give him. But the sweet spot, in my opinion, for him would probably be around that 2.7, 2.8 range. I'm still okay with 4 years. 3 years is probably where I'd prefer to go if I were them. But 3-4 years, anywhere between that 2.6 to 3.4. Anything more than that he asks for, you'd have to start thinking about moving him. Even though he is a really, by all accounts, apparently he's one of the favorite guys in the room, and he's one of those quiet veterans or quiet leaders rather. So I would go to that point. You look at it and say I'm trading him off. Trading off Armia's contract for him. and, allocate whatever leftover it is across the board. Now, with the news that the cap is likely going up again the next year, and, the numbers you're hearing is anywhere between 92.5 to 95 million. Somebody like Evans might actually be closer to the Armia contract just because that's how the percentages work for a player of his caliber and what he's bringing in. And the fact that where he's at now in his career, he's actually considered a young vet. And like Greg said, teams apparently have been interested, but according to like Pierre Lebrun and all that they said that they've inquired about Jake Evans and whatnot. So do you really want to lose another team guy, another guy who's actually contributing, and when he doesn't get hurt or concussed by Mark Scheifele obliterating him, he does do some good things for the Habs and on the ice. He's serviceable. You could move him up and down the lineup to a certain degree, obviously not second, but for the bottom six, he's very serviceable. Could put him on the wing just like you could put him at center. So again, 2.7 max 3.4. Anything more, it's you got to move on from him.
All right, so a two-part follow-up for both of you then. One, taking to what Greg is suggesting, on an expiring contract, what would it take to move him? If some team trying to make a long playoff push comes up and says, this is like the perfect guy for us to have as a 4C that can move up to 3C if injuries happen, and we want to go for it. What do you try to kind of extort from a team like that? What would make you make that move? And do you feel like a guy like Owen Beck coming up could be the next Jake Evans or a slightly better version of him? And does that make Jake Evans kind of expendable?
Well, to answer your first question, I think I'd go, I think you don't necessarily want to move him. You need a good offer to kind of pull the trigger on it.
Yeah, of course. So what would it take? Like, what's that, the offer you can't refuse that you'd be like, yeah, we have to do that. Anything less than that, no, I keep him.
I think I do a second and plus an asset, or if someone wants to offer a first, then sure.
I think that's an easy one. Okay, so let's take it down from a first, because I don't think anyone's offering a first.
Yeah, that's what.
If it's a first, it's a yes, sure.
That's why I said like a second and like an asset, just a roster player, like someone that can just fill a jersey if we just sell again at the trade deadline. And for Owen Beck, I think a long term, yes. I think right now I think it's ideal for him to stay in Laval as long as possible, especially this season with how Laval is playing and how Montreal is playing. So I think keep him in there, just maximize his offensive potential, I guess, because of how he's just not counted on as a defensive guy. Whereas in Montreal, I think that's mostly like the spot that we're gonna slot him in, where he's just gonna be more of a defensive guy, and now in Laval, he's like kind of one of the big offensive dynamos. So I think we're kind of just maximizing his two-way potential right now by keeping him in Laval, and I think next year I think he's going to be very hard to not keep in Montreal. I think.
Very good.
I like the trade package that Greg came up with, because what it kind of reminds me of is when Montreal, in that same time frame, that's what they traded Artturi Lehkonen for. Now, I'm not saying Lehkonen and Jake Evans are of the same caliber, but if you remember that trade, it was a second and Justin Barron. So it's kind of in that same mold. If you look at Jake Evans, the way he's playing now and the role he has is very Lehkonen-like. Third line. The difference is that Lehkonen has the ability to play on a second line and, jump up the line, where Jake Evans has proven that he can't do that. So I wouldn't. And if you look at Justin Barrett as an asset, when we first acquired him, he was a late first round pick and a second. So the second is probably what would be the value there, and filling in getting a jersey there, or filling in getting a player who could fill in a jersey, just not at Justin Barron's ceiling or his potential at the time, would be something to fill back into a bottom six role. You're getting a bottom six player along with that second round pick is what I would see it. When they got Justin Barron, it was with the hope that he'd be a second pairing defenseman, a right-hand second pairing defenseman, and he just hasn't hit that yet. If he'll ever hit it, we don't know. But that's where I would see it. If they're going to move on from him, if they really are going to move on because they just can't get the numbers to work, then that's what they do. Otherwise, I don't think there is a package that makes sense, because what are you going to get? If it's just for another bottom six guy, you might as well keep the guy you have. Unless you traded for a depth defenseman that's on the right-hand side just to shore up your right D, and Jake Evans is able to get you that, then you do that kind of a move.
What I didn't mention is that we're just gonna do like Plekanec with him and just trade him and then sign him right away on July 1st again. So we just get free assets from him.
Oh, you want to?
Greg's playing
that rarely happens
chess
nowadays.
Greg's playing that 4D chess.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess it's an option. It's an option, unless of course it's part of the signing that the team that wants him says we need to talk to him to ensure that we can sign him, and that becomes the thing. But yeah, I mean, I guess all of these things are possible. Quickly though, Owen Beck, to your estimation, Vito, do you see him being the guy?
I've said it for a few years now. He has all the upside to be like a solid 3C. And you know what? If you watch his game and his leadership qualities and all that, he's got that potential to. I'm not saying to be an everyday 2C, but like let's say somebody is hurt or right now they're trying to figure out whether Doc's the guy. He could go there and be a spark as a 2C and be responsible at both ends of the ice and not really cause you any problems. Whereas Doc, you have him. It's more about his offensive ceiling, and that's why you place him as the 2C more so than his defensive ceiling. But Beck is more of a well-rounded player. When I look at Beck in his game, not necessarily stylistically, but the mindset is a very two-way. Doc was not two-way, and he's supposed to be the second-line center.
Yeah, but Doc's offensive pedigree.
Yeah. But that's why, right? So when you look at Doc, you're like, I see this guy. Well, we hope that when they acquired him, that he could have been an every season 70-point guy when he hits a ceiling. It's the hope. It's still the hope today. Beck, I don't see him as being a 70-point guy, but I see him being as a very good two-way, responsible, awesome at producing secondary scoring and being his own like a leader in the room. So for him, I see him as being the 3C eventually, and even if it means that you move Evans to the wing if they decide to keep him, great. If they do move on from Evans, then yes, Owen Beck is coming in and he's going to at some point, maybe 20 games into next season, be the 3C. Yeah.
Having Owen Beck allows the team to look at him during contract negotiation and say, listen, we love you, we want to keep you, but let's not play hardball because there's a younger, better you coming. And well,
we can't say better. We don't know for sure, but the upside is better. There. Yes, the upside of where Owen Beck was drafted and what he's done, and winning with Saginaw and all that stuff. Like, yes.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, very good. I want to bring it back a little bit to Hutson again, just to touch on him for a second, because I have a scenario, and I like for you guys to pick only one. You can only have one of these things happen. Just out of curiosity's sake, where you guys stand. Would you prefer to see Caufield score 40 goals this season, Suzuki hit 90 points this season, or Lane Hutson win the Calder this season?
I'll go with Suzuki 90, just because I think he's, I think an elite 1C, I think is the most important thing. I think, hardware is fun and all, but I think it doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, Tyler Myers won the Calder in his rookie year, and I mean, I'd rather him, just being a solid, finalist or whatever, and being solid, throughout his whole career. And I think Caufield, oh my God, I'm losing my voice. Caufield, I think he's going to be scoring a lot of goals, and I think he should be hitting 40. But I think just Suzuki taking that next step would be very huge for us, and it would erase a lot of question marks in terms of, right now he's producing when he's not playing very well, but you can do that over 82 games and expect to be still over a point per game. And I think just for him to potentially hit 90, it would change completely, less pressure on Michael Age, less pressure on Demidov to produce offense when he arrives. And just having a real 1C would be a first, and I don't know how long, but it would be very refreshing and reassuring.
Excellently said. I agree, and I'll get to it in a second. Vito.
I don't disagree with anything you said about Suzuki, but I would say the Cole Caufield being the 40-goal guy, or even getting to the 50 for the first time since, Stéphane Richer and all that stuff, it'd be great to see finally have that goal scorer that you can go into every season and say, okay, we got that 40-plus goal scorer. It's been a long time since you could have said that you have a 40-plus goal scorer with the Montreal Canadiens. Now, if you also look at Cole Caufield, there's a lot of doubters based on last season where you saw that he had a bit of a dip in the goal scoring, at least in terms of the expectations. But now you're seeing at the pace he's playing, and hopefully he keeps it to a certain degree. I mean, 60 goals is what he's on pace for 60 goals right now, and I'd be super surprised if he hits 60. But to have 40 goals and know that Nick Suzuki or even the second line or at any point has somebody like Cole Caufield there that's able to score at any given angle and at any chance, and he's a scoring threat. Because then I don't know, that's huge to have, and his game has gotten better all in terms of like Cole Caufield's defensive game as well. So for me, the fact that you can say that we've got, and if he hits it, a 40 goal scorer is just as big as saying that we have a 90-point center in Nick Suzuki, right? But I get the point of being starved for the 90-point. The thing is, I already believe that Nick Suzuki, even if he's an 82-point guy who gets a point a game, is a number one center. He's just not at the McDavid level, but he's a number one center in the NHL.
But I think for one, I like, I want Suzuki to be consistent, and I think he has been over the last few years, but to be able to still upgrade from the last seasons and continuously just improve in terms of points would be huge. And I think, just 90 points, even if you don't get a 40-goal scorer in Caufield, I think if you get to 90 points, you're going to get at least like 30 goals, 35 goals, whatever it may be. I don't think he's going to finish the season with like 20 goals and 70 assists. So I think, just to get a center that can get 90 points, whether it's Caufield that gets 40 or not, he's going to elevate players around him. And, you're not going to get a center with 90 points and wingers with like 40. So I think it would be also a huge thing for Slav, for Doc, for anyone who plays with him. I think it would just mean that our team as a whole is a lot better. And don't get me wrong, like Caufield hitting 40 would be very, very great. But I think it just given the circumstances that were given, just given the instructions, Caufield, right now is on pace for like 60 goals, but like 5 assists. Well, not anymore because of yesterday. But yeah, like tripled his assist total. But like you can get like 40 goals and like 15 assists, and I think I cannot say no to a guy getting 90 points.
But goal scoring is at a premium. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not discounting assists, especially like assists. Points are points. I look at it that way too. And there's some people that say, oh, there's secondary assists, and they complain about that stuff. But goal scoring comes at a premium in the NHL, and when you have one of the best ones, if it gets to that point, on your roster and on your team, and he's a shoo-in every year to be at a minimum he's 35, but he's got that ceiling to be a 50 goal scorer. How many 50 goal scorers are there really in the NHL? Or even how many better? Let's be even more conservative than 50 goals, because 50 goals is a huge milestone. Even 40 goals, it's significant. We're looking at Patrick Lane. We were so excited when we got him because he has the potential to hit 40 goals. It's a lot of goals coming from one player. So that's where I'm kind of like I'm looking at it. And don't get me wrong, Greg, I agree with you. I'm a huge Nick Suzuki fan. I mean, I really, really am, and I hope he hits the 90 because it's going to shut a lot of people up who've been questioning whether he is a 1C or whether he's there by default. Like that argument's got to stop. He is a 1C. It's just that he's not one of the top 5 1Cs in the entire league. But for me, I would put it on the goal. I'd put the goal scoring. Give me. I mean,
it's fascinating, and again, right? I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer to this. I mean, there are ones that I think you want to see, like, for example, that 90-point threshold has been elusive for a long time. Now, it just so happens that if I did the quick research, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments or if you guys know different, but it seems like the last time we had a 90-point player was the exact last
90-point center? Spirit Turgeon, I believe.
Well, 90-point player.
Okay.
Just player to begin. It's, I believe,
96 or 90.
It was 93, and it was Danfus. He had 91 in 1993, and it just so happens he scored 40 goals that season, which also makes him the last 40-goal scorer at the exact same time. So since 1993. Now, just for fun, do you guys know the last time the Canadiens had a Calder winner?
So I'm going to correct you there, Matt.
Okay, what is it?
Pierre Turgeon was actually the last 90-point player the Montreal Canadiens had
96.
in 95,
It was
96,
96?
where he had 96 points in 80 games and he had 38 goals.
Okay. So
I felt I had a feeling your
okay,
number was
and I looked it up quickly, and forgive me then. So 96, still almost 30 plus years ago, 30 years ago, almost close to. And the 40 goal scorer.
I know where you're going.
I'm just
It's Ken
asking.
Dryden in like 71 or something.
It's 1971 was the last time the Canadiens had a Calder winner. That's all I'm saying. Now, Greg made an excellent point. You win the Calder, it doesn't mean you become this Hall of Fame player. It doesn't. There's not a guarantee. That said, 96 is a long time ago. 93 is even longer. 1971
I won't
is
lie,
an eternity ago.
I won't lie. Before Greg said what he said about the Tyler Myers thing, and you could win a Calder and doesn't necessarily. My initial gut reaction was to go with Lane Hutson, and I was going to go with Lane Hutson because it'd be cool to have the Calder. You know, the guy's a rookie and whatever, and at the same time, it'd be beating out Michkov, right? So it shuts some of those people up who are basically saying that Michkov's going to win it no matter what, even though Logan Stankoven's ahead of both of them at the moment, right? But when Greg said that, you know what, just because you win that Calder doesn't mean that it's a shoo-in or you're automatically a Hall of Famer. It means that you're going to have the best career ever and all that.
Yeah.
That's when I was like, you know what, that is a very, very good argument to make.
And rightfully so. That being said, though, can we not agree that someone who wins the Calder has a much higher probability of ending up being a very, very good player versus people that don't have one? How many busts that won the Calder end up, like, you know what I mean? Like, how often does that happen? So I sit here and I kind of weigh the pros and cons, and I kind of weigh, like, man, I really
want to. You're going with the Lane Hutson Calder? Is that what you're telling us?
I kind of want to say yes, because
say yes.
I kind of want to.
Yeah, there's no kind of.
Well, because okay, well, putting me to the fire here. I did say that I want Suzuki 90 points. I think that was what jumped first. But then when I think about it and I get into the numbers and I look about it, I think you have one chance to win a Calder. You have your rookie season and that's it, and it's gone. And so when I think about rookies that are coming and stuff, I mean, next year you got Demidov coming. Could he possibly be a guy too? I mean, by all intent purposes, yeah.
You just want the headlines. You want to be able to say,
I don't want the headlines. I don't want the headlines. I'm simply saying that I think Suzuki's going to get there, because this is like my question, in case if it wasn't clear, was you can pick one of these now this season. It isn't necessarily to say that he can't win, he can't get 90-point plus season next year, or Cole can't hit 40 goals in 4 years from now, or whatever. It's right this season. What would you prefer? I think I'd prefer Hutson to win the Calder this season, given the trajectory that the team is going on. Because if Cole scores 40 and the team's the bottom 5, it's going to feel ugly. If Suzuki hits 90 and the team's the bottom 5, it's going to feel ugly. I think Hutson can do his sweet thing and win a Calder, and the team can still be in the bottom 5. It's insane. I think all three of those scenarios are insane, but the Calder one kind of is not necessarily the outlier like the other two would probably be. Because what happened to the team if those guys are putting up those kind of numbers? So that would be cool. And again, he does have to beat Michkov, and he does have to beat Stankoven, which I think is going to be very difficult. But anyways, I'll be that guy. I'll say give me Lane Hutson to win the Calder this year, because I think the other two could happen next season or the following season.
What a mistake.
It's just for
Greg said it. Greg said it.
Just for fun.
Personal achievements do not result in team success.
Gallagher almost won it.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
Gallagher almost won it. I think he was a finalist the Huberdeau year, but I think he was the runner-up. But I think it would be a much better storyline to have Fowler be the first to win it since Dryden. I think it's like we have the best goaltender since Dryden. It's in terms of storyline. I think we just got
okay. And what about the storyline, Greg? That we get Hutson followed by Demidov followed by Fowler, and we get three of them. When did that happen?
Look at the dreams coming out of you guys.
Why can't a man dream? Why? Listen. It's not going to happen. I'm having fun with it, but why can't a man dream? I do want to end on this though, because I think it's interesting, and I don't want to say a more sour note to end on, but out of curiosity's sake. And you mentioned Michkov, so I think it's fair to bring it up. He's doing very well. Can we all agree? Michkov is doing very well, albeit he's getting healthy scratched for no reason that I can understand over there in Philly, but this happens and he comes back and he puts up points. He's doing very well. It looks like he's living up to the hype. It looks like it. It looks very, very promising. And again, looks can be deceiving. We can't predict the future. We have no idea. And maybe some people will say this is an unfair comparison. But just given what you've seen of Michkov so far this season and what he's doing at this particular point, even though Reinbacher has been injured, do you feel like the Canadiens made the wrong choice taking Reinbacher over Michkov?
Oh, I mean, yes and no.
I don't want yeses and nos. You say safe,
yes
safe
and
answer.
No. It's hard to gauge because you're looking at one guy that's playing and is showing some promise and is successful and is living up to the thing, and there was so many variables, and then there's even the fact that apparently he was not gonna go and report to any team other than the Philadelphia Flyers.
I'm talking, yes, and I want to be crystal clear about this, right? It's an unfair question. It's just because people have been kind of like, clamoring, look up Michkov, look at the points he's putting up. And I'm not saying whether I agree, disagree at this point or another, because I don't want to make you think like I took one way and you got to go the other way just for the fun of it. I'm simply saying, given the ability to look back, not that you should go back and say, at the time, this we didn't know, and at the time, now, knowing what you know now, what you've seen now, would you have done it different if you were the guy in charge? That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have no choice when you look. If you're doing it based on right now and looking back, you have no choice. But at the same time, I'm going to argue and look at you and say, yes, Michkov is likely the best player available in that moment. But Montreal's biggest weakness that they have now, besides, you could always say the talent and all that stuff, you always get premium talent, it's right-hand defense. And if Reinbacher does become the next, some compared his game to Pietrangelo, some have compared it to Colton Parayko, so, if he does become that guy, then it was a need, which you shouldn't draft based on need, but it's not a need where you look and say it was a complete and total gamble. You took the best defenseman of that draft, who also happens to be right hand, and he ends up being one of the top defensemen in the league, two-way defensemen anyway. Then that's what your trade-off was. We traded off,
and that's fair. And again, I'll let Greg answer, but I mean, clearly this is a loaded question, and it's a loaded question.
Yeah, but yes, if we're looking at it right now, I'm going to take the guy who's on pace to be, in his rookie year to produce 50, 60 points, than the guy who's hurt and not playing. But it's unfair.
Fair enough, Greg.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty easy. I think right now, just given the circumstances that we have now, I don't think Reinbacher, in a redraft, I don't think he's even in the top 10 because of just his injury issues since the draft and how good other players has been. But he was not my choice on draft day, and I was pretty disappointed. But it's you cannot change it now, and I think you just gotta support the guy that we drafted and hope for the best, because you can't go back. It's not. It doesn't bring anything to try to compare him to the players that were drafted after, because it's just gonna, we're just gonna regret things that we had no control over. And I think right now I'm just hoping that he turns out to be like an NHLer and a pretty decent one.
I think the fact that
fair, hold on a second.
Hold on.
I just want to say, because he's saying it's not fair and it doesn't do anything. That's all we do, Greg. But all the fans do is look back and say, "What? I can't believe they took him over him and stuff." And I 100% understand your point. And none of us had a say over the matter, and none of us could go back and change anything. But the fact remains that Michkov was available and the team passed on him. Now, we've come to find out, like Vito was alluding to, there's rumors that he only wanted to play for Philadelphia for whatever his reasons. So who knows what that might have done. There was disinformation campaign that was happening during the course that he was a difficult player in the room and this and that. And apparently this was all a ploy by the agent to make sure that enough teams pass on him so that he can pick his destination. Point is, you have this guy and he's doing very well. And it seems like the bill of goods that we were sold about him turned out to be true in terms of his talent. This is a very, very skillful player, and he scores goals, and it looks like he's going to do it for a long time. Anything can happen, but at the time of this recording, anyways, it seems that his future is very bright. On the flip side of things, Reinbacher, it's early. It's super early.
It's super early. Let's say
it is what it is. He's doing very well, though.
With the info that we have now, Columbus would still take Lindstrom over Demidov. And even if we go back a little bit like
that's my
further,
point.
because it's just the longer we get back, it's the fairest, the more fair it gets. Like, do you think Arizona doesn't regret taking Soderstrom over Caufield, or Broberg over Caufield, or people just like not trading Glass over Suzuki? Like, we had some good, like Goulet, whoever was drafted before him, like there were a few questionable ones. You know, we had some good drafts, and especially recently, I think Reinbacher is pretty much the only one where we're like, Meshar and whatever.
I don't know. If we're going back, the Kotkaniemi one wasn't very good. It was probably the worst one, I would say. But
hold
I
on.
get what
he's making the argument in reverse. The further you go back, the easier it is to answer that, because obviously Kotkaniemi is a prime example. Him going 3, you sit there and you're like, how do you do that over Quinn Hughes? How do you do that over Brady Tkachuk? Like, it blows your mind given the sample size that we have. It's a very obvious answer. But now the fact is, he's 16 games into his career. So it is still a small enough sample size, but it's the fairest one. You got one who's played no games, and you've only really seen him in Laval for a handful of games last season. You saw him in some preseason action this season. Not enough to really get a beat on him. It's going to take a long time for defensemen to mature to get to their
there you go.
Yes, I understand everything you're saying. This is my point. That I bring this question up, I see how you're both getting upset about it, and that's my point.
I'm getting upset. You're not letting us finish.
I don't think it's the fairest. I just think it's the one that's still in the air. But I think it's the least fair, because I mean, we're talking about a guy that's played like 11 games before getting his knee like exploded, and then Michkov was like 16 games into his career and has like more healthy stretch than Reinbacher ever has. So it's not.
That's okay. That's a strange cherry pick. He also has more points than Reinbacher has.
Yeah, but okay. I always found that. Okay, I get it. We're comparing because you could have drafted Michkov over Reinbacher, but the fact of the matter is that it's really hard to ever compare a defenseman who was projected to be a two-way defenseman to a guy who's supposed to be a high-octane, highly skilled forward. You can't compare the two. Where I would really compare the players like that, it's if you passed on Michkov to get another forward of a similar position, and you look and say, let's make that comparison now, right? But of a defenseman, when you look at right-hand defensemen, they're almost as valuable as getting premium goal scorers, because right-hand defensemen who are mobile, who can play in today's NHL, are very, very rare, and they're few and far between. So now the hope, again, I get what your question is, but the hope is that Reinbacher, which is going to take some time to develop, and hopefully could put these injuries behind him, becomes a Devin Taves, a Parayko, and really up there, a Pietrangelo, a guy who could produce you 50, 60 points and be stable and be a leader and be a big right-handed defenseman. If Montreal gets that from him, then no, they're going to stabilize the back end, and they're going to have a rarer piece than a Michkov, in my opinion.
I'm with you guys.
The Demidov draft.
The Demidov
really
thing, definitely soothes any wounds that people might have. And the only reason why I mention this, because I do also agree with you. I agree it's a hard thing to compare, but you're not necessarily comparing the players. You're comparing what the players can bring to the team. All right? That's how you make the comparison.
You're building a team.
You're building a team. Now, the team, more often than not, has difficulties putting up points this season in particular, and that's where we're going with, and that's where Michkov would have been playing this year if he were on the Canadiens. They have a hard time scoring goals. That's a fact. It's just a true fact. They're also defensively not sound this season. And so Reinbacher, of course, wouldn't be, if he wasn't hurt, wouldn't be in there, and we'd be all expecting, hey, you were a top 5 pick, man. You better get out there and shut everybody down. Defensemen take longer. It isn't necessarily a fair thing to compare. And the fact that people are out there that are trying to, make this a thing, I brought it up today because of the lunacy that is this comparable. It is. I can't understand why looking at Michkov's success is all of a sudden driving some Canadiens fans, insane. And, oh, look what we could have had, and look at this, and look at that. You guys have to wait. You have to give it a little bit of time. You have to let, hopefully, Reinbacher get over whatever this injury thing that he's got going on is, and that's behind him, like Vito said. And you got to hope that in a couple of years, after he matures, he's got the right frame, he's got the right size, and you'll see the assets that he's got on the ice.
Look across the NHL. How many teams in the NHL right now are looking for a right-handed defenseman? Heck, even Montreal's looking for a right-handed defenseman. It's almost every team in the NHL is looking for either a second pairing right-handed defenseman or a guy who could come and play on the top pairing. They're looking for right-handed defensemen. Now, it's not to say that teams aren't looking for a player like Michkov's skill and Michkov's talent and the fact that he could produce and all that. They are looking for that. But they always, if you look at general managers, and while Dave has always said that general managers can be dumb and all that, there always seems to be a need for a right-handed defenseman. They feel they can go and get a player that maybe might not be a 90, 100-point player, but can produce 60 points, let's say, and do other aspects of the game. But there's always a need for right-hand defensemen. That's why you're looking at so many in the last few years that are not even the most talented, but teams go and pay a premium for them to acquire them. They're rarer.
And I might have a hot take about the little game that we played earlier. The Caufield 40 goals, Suzuki 90 points, or Hutson, Calder. I think above all three, if you had the fourth option that Reinbacher wins the Calder in like 1 or 2 years, I think I'd probably take that, because it just, you know what you're getting from Hutson, you know what you're getting from Caufield, you know what you're getting from Suzuki, even if they don't hit that milestone or don't win that hardware. If Reinbacher ends up being good enough to win the Calder, I think, like I said, no, he could turn out to be Tyler Myers, whatever. But if he turns out to be good enough to win the Calder in 1 or 2 years, let's say next year he just comes back from injury, spends a lot of time in Laval. If he ends up being good enough to win the Calder, I think we're not set, but we're so much more ahead than I think we currently are. I think I take that option.
That's fair. I'll allow you to expand those options. And just for the sake, before we end the episode, Vito, given that option's on the plate, would you like to change to that as well? Or do you want to stay with your, I guess you took Cole Caufield 40 goals?
Yeah, I'm going to stay with it.
You're going to stay with it? Very good. Okay. Very good, guys. Well, thanks very much. And thanks to everybody for tuning in and listening and being here and making it to the end. A rather longer-ish episode than our usual, but that's good. A lot of passionate talk here. Let us know in the comments below, per usual, your thoughts on any of the subjects that we talked about today. What would you offer Jake Evans? Would you offer Jake Evans a contract? What term cap would you allocate to that if it were up to you? Equally so, you can let us know about the 3 selections or the 4th with what Greg added. Be it, would you prefer, if you had the option today to sign a contract to guarantee Nick Suzuki hits 90 points this season, Caufield scores 40 this season, Hutson gets the Calder this season, or in 2 years' time, potentially Reinbacher comes in and gets the Calder? Which one would you choose and why? And of course, if you haven't already, please consider liking, subscribing, all of that wonderful stuff. We appreciate you, and thanks so much. So for Greg and Vito, I'm Matt, and this was
Get Pucked.